Welcome to episode 676 of the Barcelona podcast, brought to you by the Blue Wire Podcast Network. I'm Dan Hilton, and I may not be alone today. I know you're used to me being by myself, but I'm not running solo. In fact, maybe the enemy of my enemy, Bayern Munich, is my friend. So I did reach across the aisle, even though it's the opponent for the next 2 weeks, but I reached across the aisle for the Dortmund matchup to Ben McFadyean. He's the founder and elected president of the Dortmund Fan Club London since 2013. He's also the host of the podcast with the same name, the Dortmund Fan Club London. A football journalist, Ben also specializes mainly in German football as a whole in totality, so not just Dortmund. He's worked for BBC, ITV, DAZN, 442, and One Football. Ben, I tried to do it in one breath. I couldn't get it. The accolades were too many, so I want to welcome to the show, Ben.
Dan, as usual, you were great. I love your show, and thank you so much for having me on.
Well, I think where we begin is where we begin with the matchup. And we're talking mainly about Dortmund. And for those, just like the clubs who are doing a home and away, of course, you and I are kind of doing the same thing. So you're coming before leg one and previewing this on my show. So if you're listening on my feed or Ben's feed, this is technically the Barcelona podcast. And then the inverse will be the inverse with you in the other direction for leg two after we get to see the first 90 minutes. And so I want to talk more about Dortmund, how Dortmund got here. And again, for out of your listeners that might be joining me, this is more Dortmund things that you might know already. So how Dortmund got here in the Champions League. You beat Lille 2-1 on the road after drawing 1-1 at home in the first round of the knockouts. Maximilian Bierre had the winner after Emre Can tied it at 1 with a PK. Jonathan David also opened the scoring. The Canadian, if I remember right, after a Dortmund mistake playing out of the back. I think it was like not a great mistake. And then Dortmund wound up coming back in that tie. I watched that game, Ben, and I felt like Dortmund was a better team. And I felt like it was going to eventually be theirs. But the question was a matter of when, because I think as that match went on, Lille kind of said, hey, even if we're the tiny underdogs here, they were still a top 8 side for a reason in the league phase, were Lille. But I did think Dortmund were just slightly better, and I think they did prove that over 180 minutes.
Yeah, I think so too. I think a couple of things essentially. Borussia Dortmund have had a very, very mixed season this season. Basically, we haven't been able to sort of recognize from 1 week to the next what the tactics are likely to be. And as you probably recall, the first game round when we played against Barcelona, Nuri Sahin was our coach. So the way that Dortmund were playing were quite different. I think we had a very, very good opportunity in the first game to actually turn Barcelona over. But the example that you've given about the Lille game was a very good one. I think that the pressure was off us. We went in very open-minded. And Niko Kovac basically positioned us in a very high-pressing game. And I feel, to be fair, the big thing was that Borussia Dortmund, the fans at Borussia at our stadium, at the Westfalenstadion, they really are the 12th man. And I really felt like Lille were very, very overwhelmed by 80,000, 81,000, the intensity of the game, etc. They really looked like they lost their concentration. And that's one of the benefits, basically, of playing in Dortmund is it's an incredibly overwhelming, basically, atmosphere in the stadium, and it can be incredibly infectious. So when the fans and the players basically are able to really, really combine, it's an incredible atmosphere. It's an incredible, overwhelming atmosphere, and I felt like Lille basically, as we say in England, bottled it. I don't know if you know that expression, but they just basically they lost their confidence, and Dortmund were able to overwhelm them. So over 2 games, I think Borussia Dortmund were overwhelming and basically were able to come away. And I think we deserve to be where we are. But overall, this has been a very, very poor season. The club has basically been yo-yoing between 4th and 10th position, as low as 11th position this season. And that's way, 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 way beneath the expectations for a club that's finished second in kind of about 12 of the last 20 seasons.
Well, it's funny you do mention that first matchup, because I don't know what we can extrapolate from that and take this into this second tie, because yes, you're right. And you mentioned too how that yellow wall and playing in at home for Dortmund has been such a fortress. And of course it has. I mean, Barça, this is the stat here that you want, maybe Dortmund fans don't want to hear, but Barça having won 3-2 a few months ago, they're the only visitors that had won in European competition at Dortmund for more than 3 years. It was a 2021 loss against Ajax was the last time. So at the time, it had been 3 years, and now again, going on 4 years, that Barcelona is the only team to have beaten Dortmund in Germany at their home stadium. And it's so funny because, again, I go back to that matchup before, and I wonder tactics, what are going to be similar, what are going to be different, because I don't know how much Dortmund might do different. Now, we'll do a little bit more tactics later, but I want to recap that first match that ended 3-2. So for Dortmund, it was a lot about playing that offside trap. Guirassy was constantly just hugging that offside line and trying to get in behind. And Dortmund mainly were trying to attack Balde through Durandal. And unfortunately, again, for Dortmund fans, Balde has just gotten better and better since that game. And I think in that matchup, it didn't really work out. The press for Dortmund was also a bit confusing to me. I felt that Sabitzer, when I've seen Dortmund do well, he's played in a deeper position, but he was pressing as the highest midfielder the way that Barcelona had Busquets do in years past. And that kind of allowed Barcelona to go quickly on these diagonals when they got the ball back, because then Sabitzer was a bit too high up the field. And I think Barcelona was then counterattack or Gegenpress. There we go. There's a German word for it. The Gegenpress for Barcelona was working well. Rafinha also didn't really have his best game, neither did Lewandowski, and yet Barcelona kind of found the way because Pedri and Balde, who again, since that time, have basically gone strength to strength. And then there was also some stuff there with Kubarsi knocks over Guirassy for the PK on the first goal, and Guirassy, I thought he kind of sold it a little bit early on with Negro Martinez as well. Ref didn't go for that one. They go for the second one. And then it was also Barcelona playing an onside trap for Rafinha's goal on the first goal. And then for the second goal, a lot of just Lamine Yamal and Koundé, good work on the right side for them. And then Dortmund, same thing for the second goal. They put on their subs, and this was a really good job by Sahin at the time, so I'm going to give him a credit, even though he's no longer the manager. But a good job with the subs because they made an immediate impact scoring that second goal. Also playing that onside trap against a goalkeeper in Inaki Peña, who, again, Dortmund did not see Chesney because he was not at the club when the last time these two teams played, which tells you just how much can change in a matter of 5 months. And then Dortmund, I think the reason they lost that match is because they put too many bodies forward. And then Ferran Torres comes on with a bit of energy, and just like then, he is back to scoring more goals in games he's played. At the time, it was 4 goals in 3 games, and now I think it's 6 goals in 5 games or 7 goals in 6 games at the moment for Ferran Torres. So kind of bookending his good form, and that wound up giving Barca the 85th minute winner. So as I said, like, it was a bit more open. I think the one thing I can extrapolate that we know is going to be very different, and I guess we're doing tactics now, is that I just can't imagine over the course of 180 minutes in a 2-legged tie that the game is going to be as open as it was the first time. Or, I mean, you watch Dortmund. Are they just going to be willing or believe in themselves to be open with Barca over 180 minutes?
Yeah, so first of all, obviously the coach before this coach, Niko Kovac, was of course Nuri Sahin. And you made a lot of different points there. As usual, you're very, very precise, Dan, and you've done your homework and you've thought it all through, and that's what I like about your show. So basically, I guess the challenge essentially for Dortmund is that we're playing against a side which is basically man for man stronger. I can't really see that many weaknesses in the Barcelona side. I mean, it's you're not far ahead on the La Liga's table, but you're basically still playing in 4 different tournaments, and I think we kind of got it right in Dortmund. But again, the 12th man, the stadium, the overwhelming atmosphere. I mean, personally, I went out to the Camp Nou in 2019, I think it was, when Borussia Dortmund played out there, and I have to say that the intensity of the atmosphere, it's very intense, but it's not as intense again as Borussia Dortmund Stadium, Westfalenstadion. So I think that basically what Niko Kovac has done is he's basically, it's traditionally for him, he's focused a lot on the defensive performances. We've only conceded 43 goals so far this season, which basically sounds like a lot, and it is a lot over the last 5 seasons in comparison. So 2 seasons ago, we only conceded 39 in the whole season, and we've still got 6 games to go. So basically, Kovac has improved the defensive performances, and I think that he's managing to bring out the best in the defenders that we now have, and I think that's going to be the crunch thing. I mean, we obviously have an outstanding goalkeeper, Switzerland international keeper, and Gregor Kobel. And then in front of him, you have really strong defenders such as Valdemar Anton and Daniel Svensson and Julian Riasson. The challenge, however, is that Nico Schlotterbeck today has been called in with a serious injury, and he's going to keep him out. In fact, he's not even going to. You won't like to hear this, but he's actually not going to be playing at the FIFA Club World Cup. And of course, I'd love to hear what your views are over the States about FIFA Club World Cup, which is going to bring some big names to the USA. But basically, yeah, we had a fantastic game the first time round, and I think that it'll be a similarly open game. The players are going in with a lot of confidence, with a lot of openness, but we also know that this is basically one of our major chances to have Champions League football at Dortmund next season, because basically the way the UEFA coefficients are looking, it's only going to be 6 places, and it's an incredibly tight table at the moment. We've got 6 points between the 4th place and the 9th place in the Bundesliga. So there are a whole load of teams, and very unexpected teams like Mainz 05, Freiburg, etc., who are fighting for European places. And Dortmund are not taking anything for granted, but they do very much know, I think, going into this, that the pressure is on Barcelona, not on us, because at the end of the day, we're just happy to make up the numbers, quite honestly.
Yeah, I mean, for Dortmund, it's always a compromising position where you're fighting for the Bundesliga one season and next season. There's always, I feel like, in the Bundesliga more than the Liga, more than the Premier League. And we don't have time to talk about the financial models today, but I mean, one of the reasons about the way that you have those surprise German clubs pop into the top, even 3, 4, 5, and I'd like to give credit to Freiburg for what they're doing. I mean, they're just above Dortmund, but it hasn't just been Freiburg; it's been Stuttgart in years past. Again, it's not just been Bayern Munich and RB Leipzig and Dortmund, the ones with the financial muscle behind them. But yeah, I mean, Schlotterbeck, that is a huge loss. I mean, he with the torn meniscus in his left knee won't be able to play again for Dortmund for the rest of the season, as you mentioned. But it's not just Schlotterbeck as well. Some of the other lineup. I'm going to ask you now. I'll give you some time as I basically go over all your injuries or players that are missing. What the lineup that you think that Niko Kovac is going to go with, because there is Niklas Süle, who hasn't really been playing anyway. Both he and Marcel Sabitzer have been out to injuries. And for the Dortmund I did get to see in the first half of the season, Sabitzer was more important. He's been out with injury recently. And then Pascal Gross, who came on and scored that important goal in the first leg. I mean, in the first leg, but the first matchup this season, he has a yellow card accumulation suspension, so he is unavailable as well. And then Ben Sambani was substituted early in the last match due to physical issues. So want to see if he's going to be available or not. But with those players out, I still think Dortmund do have quite a few horses. And in particular, it's that attacking trio and how they line up between Bayer and Guirassy and Adeyemi, Duranville, Gittins. How do you find that Niko Kovac is going to line up his team for this first leg at least?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question, Dan. And obviously, the issue is that Nico Schlotterbeck is out. So I reckon you're probably right. The former Bayern Munich defender Niklas Süle will probably be in. Highly controversial guy. He's actually on a salary of 15 million, which was basically the money that Marco Reus, who's doing great things in Los Angeles nowadays. I guess you guys are all aware of Marco Reus over there, and please send him back when you have a moment, if you don't mind. Yeah, we're looking at Gregor Kobel and Julian Rierson, Niklas Süle, Waldemar Anton, Germany international, Daniel Svensson, who came in on loan basically from Denmark, but he's been doing really, really well, a young Swedish international. Emre Can, the captain of the club, somewhat controversial as a captain, hasn't really established himself as yet. Also, he's currently undergoing some negotiations about contracts and so on.
Do you think
we brought back.
Do you think that Emre Can, do you think he's going to play center back in this one? Because Süle, the reports are that Süle is injured and is out for the match. So if that's the case, and if he's not back, do you think it'll be Can as a center back instead of in the midfield?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's about right. Yeah, I agree with you. And Sali Ochan ahead of that, and he's basically been brought back from Wolfsburg this season. He's a tough guy. He's very much the tough guy that we need in the center of the midfield. I think he came in at just about the right time. And then basically, as you mentioned yourself, a wonderful attacking midfield and also offensive lineup. My favorite player personally. He's not always consistent, but he is one of the most talented players in German football right now, in my opinion, Julian Brandt.
Yes.
And then Karim Adeyemi, who is, he's one of the fastest players in the Bundesliga. He has great scoring potential, scored a beautiful goal at the weekend, and then obviously Maxi Bayer, who's a very young guy who they spent a lot of money on, more than 30 million, which for Dortmund is a record amount of money, comparable to huge players in the past like Andre Schürrle and other big players. And then Ousmane Dembele, indeed, Ousmane Dembele. Well, there's a player that you guys know very well.
I know him very well.
And then obviously the cherry on the cake, if you say that in the States, we do in England, is obviously the absolute super guy, super player, Serhou Guirassy, who's a French Guinean and a striker. He's already notched up 25 goals across all competitions this season, and yeah, I mean, there's basically no position that he can't score from. But I love the fact that Maxi Bayer picked up 2 goals the weekend, and he's on really, really good form right now, and he's a young Germany international. I believe he's 21, so he's got a lot of football left in him, and yeah, we've done really, really well to secure those guys up front. But yeah, they feed off very well off each other. Serhou Guirassy and Maxi Bayer feed off very well off each other, and Jamie Gittens is the joker in the pack, so it's very hard to know whether he'll get a run out or not, but he'll definitely be in there somewhere.
It's funny that you call him the joker, because I think the Chelsea loanee, from what I've seen, even
Carney.
Yes, Carney. I did watch a bit of the last game, Chukwuemeka. That's another name, Chukwuemeka, as well as Yemi. These are names that have been linked to Barcelona in the past, and for the old heads from when I started this show, Julian Brandt in his time at Bayer Leverkusen. That actually, fun fact, the best non-Barcelona player I've seen live was Julian Brandt while playing for Leverkusen at Stuttgart match. He was electric. It made sense to me. I actually felt he even went to Dortmund a little bit late. I figured he would be leaving Leverkusen earlier than he did.
Yeah,
Dortmund came in for him. And it's funny because Julian Brandt, because he has such a baby face, I think people still think he's in his early 20s, but he's 28 at this point. As you mentioned, Bayer is, I think, an unknown name outside of Germany. Honestly, it's one of those examples of a player that, because I don't think, because he went from Hoffenheim to Dortmund and he wasn't playing for Bayern Munich, you never hear any connections to him. And so his time with the German national team, he's kind of one of those other ones, right? And he's a young and up-and-coming player where I don't know how long he'll be at Dortmund if he continues to play this way. I mean, you know how Dortmund are as a club, where they take what they have and they obviously have to recoup what you could get from these talents. And very rarely do you have players sticking around for a long time, one of which we'll talk about at the end of the show in Matt Hummels. But yes, I mean, overall, it's interesting to me because Dortmund, they always seem to have a lot of young and up-and-coming talent, right? Like, what are you going to get from Gittens? He's 20 years old. What are you going to get from Duranville? He's 18 years old. There's an American, Cole Campbell, who I obviously is not going to start. I would really not expect him to come off the bench either in this one, but he's 19 years old as well. As you mentioned, Bayer, he's 22 years old. But for all that young talent, I mean, and Felix Nemechka, if he gets the start here, the 24-year-old German international, was he born in the UK or maybe born in? I think he was raised.
He is, but he's I think he's injured at the moment, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, so he's unavailable. But even if he were to play, it's funny because Dortmund really, very much like Barcelona, I feel like there is this mix of either are they too young or are they such established veterans or they've been around a long time. But I'm
Great point.
Where you have players in like like Lewandowski again. Like Dortmund doesn't have any players at that age, or even Inigo Martinez, who would be the oldest player I'm looking on the Dortmund roster. So we'll say the old heads for Barcelona are older than Dortmund's oldest players, and yet some of the young players for Barcelona, including Lamine Yamal and Cubarsí, are pretty much younger than all of the Dortmund players as well. So it is interesting that Barcelona bookends it, but I think Dortmund does have an interesting mix of really young talent and then players who are more established. And I don't know, do you get that sense that you think that the mix of youth and established players, but there's a lot of youth in that group, in the same way that I find that I've always enjoyed watching Dortmund the same way that I enjoy watching Arsenal. That those are not teams I root against because there is something about that youth development that is enjoyable to watch. There's something useful. There's exuberance to it. But again, these are clubs with big expectations as well, which always seem to brush up against what the strategy is in transfer market.
Yeah, absolutely, Dan. Good point. I mean, before the show, you showed me your, I think it was 13-14 shirt. The first Puma.
I'll show people something on YouTube. Yes, I've got the
Christian Pulisic. Yeah, he joined from Hershey, Pennsylvania, when he was like 15 years old. With his cousin came in as a goalkeeper. That didn't work out so well, but obviously Christian's doing great. We had him back earlier in the season against AC Milan. It was absolutely great to see the young man. and really, really good guy, very, very popular in Dortmund. And yeah, we have Cole Campbell, as you mentioned, who's one of the up and coming players and a US player. I'd like to think that Julian Duranville is likely to do very well. I mean, he certainly looks tactically absolutely fantastic. And as you say, I mean, basically the issue with Dortmund, I mean, let me start from saying that the team that, you know, Jurgen Klopp obviously is an ever presence kind of thing at Dortmund. So
Mm-hmm.
the team that he basically took two titles and a double between 2010 to 2012 was average age was about 22 and a half. So basically, the youth thing really works at Borussia Dortmund. And our youth academy, basically, we're the record champions at under 19 level in Germany with VfB Stuttgart, one title less than them. And that says a lot. That's 9 titles in the last 20 years at under 19 level. So we're also very, very successful under 17 level. So it just goes to show, basically, that Borussia Dortmund, you know, is a team that, in spite of never having won the UEFA Youth League, which basically surprises me a lot, we're a club that basically brings through young players. And, you know, as you said, you know, players like Jadon Sancho, Jude Bellingham, Erling Haaland, and so on have all come through the club and have developed in an amazing way. I mean, I think of Jadon Sancho coming in at 17 when I first met him, incidentally together with Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang at the annual Christmas party that the club has. And basically, you know, you look at how Dortmund basically brings through these young guys. Jadon Sancho, you know, he was vice captain already a year, you know, 18 years old in the club, and he was literally playing almost every single game. I mean, absolutely incredible. So I think that because it's a very youth-focused team, a very academy-focused team, they do tend to give a lot of responsibility. There have been many, many examples of that in the past. I mean, you think about Nuri Sahin, who's well known to fans of the white team from the right team from Madrid. The word almost escaped me. I didn't want to say it, but basically,
We ain't
you know, you think
scared.
the whites from Madrid anyway, the bad side of Madrid. Yeah, so I shouldn't say that actually because my brother Oscar is a huge fan of that side of Madrid. But anyway, say no more. So essentially, Dortmund has the current lineup, as you said, there's very young players and there's older players. There's players like Pascal Gross who bring a lot of experience, and also Emre Can and so on. And we need that stabilizing factor. And if anything, the team right now is not stable enough in terms of not having enough wise heads and not enough experience, or basically the players who are there, like Emre Can, Julian Brandt, and Pascal Gross, are not able to carry the team. I think there's perhaps not enough identification with the club. I interviewed Emre Can last season, which was a very, very special opportunity for me, and I got a feeling that he's a little bit. I wouldn't want to criticize our captain, but he's a tiny bit of what we call legionary. He's been at Liverpool, he's been at Bayern Munich, he's been at Bayer Leverkusen. He started off, if I'm not mistaken, at Eintracht Frankfurt in the youth. So I feel some of these players are kind of, you know, they know that they're going to get a much higher salary at Borussia Dortmund. And for old hands like me that have been following the club for 25 years plus, maybe almost 30 years, I have to say, I'm showing my age here. A lot of us kind of feel that these guys don't have the identification. They don't identify fully with Borussia Dortmund as a football club. And I think that's part of the problem. So if you're just coming in as, you know, because you want to earn twice as much as anywhere else, the only club that pays a higher salary is Bayern Munich, and they pay about 30% more than us. So basically, that's something to really be aware of, is that a lot of players that are coming in just don't really fully get what Borussia Dortmund is, what the city is, what the industrial city is, and what basically it means to play for Borussia Dortmund and what the club means to the local people. And I think that is the kind of problem that we have at the moment. And I don't know if it's a similar thing at Barcelona, but the very, very important thing at Dortmund is you either get it or you don't get it. You either understand what it's about or you don't. And I think right now, a lot of the fans feel that the players on the pitch don't fully identify with our club.
It's interesting because
Yeah.
I do hear the parallels here, and even the way you talked about Klopp, and I already brought up Arsenal, and you see the parallels where I think the shadow, the specter, and I know he spent all this time in Liverpool, and Liverpool is where I think most people remember Jurgen Klopp, but yet Jurgen Klopp as a specter over, like, kind of looming over what Dortmund is because of some of the greatest success that the Dortmund have had in the last 20 years, like prior to the mid 90s and the Champions League success there. But in the last 20 years, it's been Jurgen Klopp. And for Barcelona, I mean, again, he was at Barcelona, that being Pep Guardiola, as manager half the time or less than half the time than he was at Man City or been at Man City. And same thing with Arsenal. It's a little different with Arsene Wenger, of course. But the specter that these huge figures when you had some of your greatest success and they loom over the club. And I think for Dortmund, it's gonna be a little bit before Dortmund they have to create new success to
Yeah,
kind of reestablish, hey, that this is a new era beyond Jurgen Klopp. And I think for Barcelona, it's again the parallels that Barcelona, the Champions League and the Liga and the trophies they're going for this season could go a long way to do that. And I think it's interesting you bring in Rafinha. I bring up Rafinha in that example that for Barcelona, the last 2-3 seasons, they were trying to throw in, especially around the light years of Messi. It was, hey, what is Arturo Vidal going to do this?
yeah,
That
Messi.
formerly at Leverkusen and at Bayern Munich, because you did have. I think there's a bit of luck to this as well as we talk about these academies, right? There is a little bit of luck that Jurgen Klopp managed to win trophies with veterans while also having a really good group of youngsters that some
Absolutely
through the club, right? And what are youth academy players more than anything else? Cheap. They don't hurt your wages, right? They're cheap and
true.
right. And I think for Barcelona, it's the same thing where right now they have this nice confluence of they've been able to shed salary, with the exception of Lewandowski, because I think talking about Rafinha and Lewandowski is kind of the example that we're speaking about, where Lewandowski obviously made his name in Germany. Of course he did. And so I don't know, regardless of how many goals he does score, because I think he's already like top 8 or something with the amount of goals he scored in 3 or 4 seasons because of the competitions they play as well, or much more than they used to play in decades past. But
True.
I don't know if Lewandowski is ever going to feel like a Barcelona player, though winning a treble or winning 4 trophies this season would do a whole hell of a lot to do that in this. But it's so interesting because Rafinha began kind of as this, one of the mercenary players that was brought in to try to establish the club a bit more when they were missing the Champions League and out in the group stage and not making the knockouts. And Rafinha now, over the course of, I would say, this season, has then become this figure. It was beginning last season, but now there's this momentum behind this guy will die for the badge. This guy, he deserves to be a captain's armband on the field when the other captains, including Araujo, are unavailable, and Ter Stegen's been hurt this whole season. So when other players are unavailable, hey, Rafinha, if the other 4 captains aren't there, he gets the captain's armband because he's that leader on the field. And it is interesting to me that winning, I think, does that more than anything else. As silly as it sounds, if you win, that kind of flips the switch of that narrative that a player that wasn't seen as ours is now ours. If I'm using air quotes for those who aren't watching.
I agree with you, Dan.
Right, and that it kind of flips the switch because if Pedri had come when he was 26 and not when he was 16, even though Pedri didn't come up through the academy, he's seen as a Barcelona player through and through. He also is probably a bad example because he was a supporter of the club early on. I think for Germany, it's a little bit different just because, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but most players who say, I dream of playing at that club in Germany, they're talking about Bayern Munich. But do you have players, at least in the west side in West what it was old West Germany?
Yeah.
There are players that come up and say, hey, I do dream of playing for Dortmund because of XYZ reason. And, or is Dortmund, let me ask this a better way. Is Dortmund more similar in the recruitment of young players to the likes of a Stuttgart or a Leverkusen? Then Leverkusen's a bad time because they just won the league. But you can understand my point. Is Dortmund closer to a Stuttgart or a Wolfsburg in their recruitment than they are to Bayern Munich? Or do you feel like they should be closer to Bayern Munich, but they aren't?
Talking about La Masia earlier, I want to obviously take my hat off to Barcelona's incredible, absolutely unbelievable ability to turn out incredible players. Indeed, I've managed to meet Marc Bartra and Sergio Gomez in the past from your club, and an absolute honor, especially Marc Bartra, a really, really great guy. And as I said,
100%. Yeah, I just played against Real Betis this weekend, and Marc Bartra, absolutely class. Yeah, I'd love to hear Marc Bartra's story.
Yeah, he's a really, really nice guy. I met him with when he was playing for Real Betis, actually. But he was with that guy. What's that guy called from Real Betis? Juanito or something? There's one really classic player that plays for. He's just stopped. Joaquin. I met him with Joaquin, and Joaquin couldn't. I can speak Spanish because my family lives in Mallorca in Spain, and Joaquin and him were just cracking jokes the whole time. It was after their game at AFC Bournemouth about 2 seasons ago. And obviously, I got Marc Bartra to take a picture with the Borussia Dortmund London flag and so on. And really, really great. But Joaquin is a totally memorable human being, and I'm really honoured to have had the chance. And then Sergio Gomez, I met him when he was at Borussia Dortmund. He's obviously at Manchester City now. And I'm surprised that Sergio Gomez hasn't managed to break through yet, to be honest. I think he's a player that has a lot of potential. I was just thinking for a second that that Emery Moore also played in Spain as well, but I don't think he played for Barcelona. It was Osasuna or something like that. Was it Real Sociedad? Emery Moore.
Emma Moore. Emma Moore. Oh man,
Anyway,
yeah, you're popping up names, but I remember Emma Moore. I think we played for Celta, if I'm not
Celta Vigo, that's right. Yeah, an outstanding talent at Borussia Dortmund. So basically, what I'm saying is that there've been quite a few. I mean, we've got Jan Koto from Madrid at the moment, and we've also had Jesus Reina, and quite a few players have come through. My favourite that came through from Spain was Achraf Hakimi, who's obviously doing great things at PSG. But unfortunately, Dortmund didn't secure him. So basically, Dan, to answer your question, the simple answer is firstly, that Dortmund is a club that would like to see itself very similar to Barcelona in terms of the academy at the Hohenbuschei is paramount. It's very much in the center of things, and essentially what they're always striving to do is develop young talents. They have a very, very intense model there where the kids are basically they're put up with the family. They basically get to complete their high school diploma. Every single player that plays for Borussia Dortmund gets to complete the high school diploma, and they're basically nurtured and looked after. And their personality development is as important as being able to, play outstanding football on the pitch. So we are very successful, Borussia Dortmund as a club, at under 17, under 15, and under 19 levels. And indeed, the under 23 side also plays at the third division of German football, which is the absolute highest, with only three other German clubs who basically have under 23s at that level of football. So I would say that I think there's a certain authenticity about that. Now, regarding the regarding the salaries, the issue with that is that they have a kind of a limit of salaries of about 10 to 15 million, which basically rules out a lot of players. Second thing is that Dortmund has an upper limit in terms of what they're willing to pay for a player, which tends to be around about 30 million, which is the class of guys like, as I said, Ousmane Dembele, etc. That those are the kind of players that they brought in for that kind of money, or Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, etc. in the past. Notably, Robert Lewandowski came in for 7.5 million, as did Shinji Kagawa. So it just goes to show that Dortmund have identified absolutely outstanding players, including Christian Pulisic, over the years. So the other issue is that basically you asked about identifying with the club. So Marco Reus was a player that was born and bred in Dortmund, and he's very much missing right now. And I think that's kind of what the key issue is, that we kind of are a little bit rudderless because he was the captain of the club. When you're born and bred in Dortmund, and there have been other players in the past like that, quite a few, basically you understand the mentality and you know what it means to play for a very working class city, a little bit like Detroit or Pittsburgh, very hardworking steel coal mining kind of environment, and very industrial city, basically, with a high level of unemployment. I mean, you shouldn't underestimate the situation in Dortmund. So the football club, with its 81,000 stadium, is the absolute centerpiece of the city and the culture in the city. Like, there is no other major football club. You have to go all the way down to the fifth tier to find another football club in Dortmund. So basically, they always look to find players that identify with the club, and they try to. I suspect there's a little bit of spin there, because every time we sign a player, they always say, "Oh, here's a picture of him when he was 13 or 12 with his comforter, his BVB comforter, his little BVB T-shirt, his little BVB tricycle, and you're just like, where did that one come from? That was a bit sly, I'm not sure if that was for real, but." It's happened in the past, like players like I think his name was Roda, Sebastian Roda. He just recently retired at Eintracht Frankfurt. He ended up becoming captain of Eintracht Frankfurt, but he was an absolute massive Borussia Dortmund fan. But he totally failed as a player. So, I mean, the fact that you identify with BVB as a club is a very, very, very good starting point, and it's something that's going to make you very popular with our fans, and the fans are almost more than the 12th man in Dortmund. They are an enormous, powerful presence at the club,
If I remember right, I do want to defend Sebastian Roda a little bit, because I do, as someone who's actually mentioned before, I think the concussions really did, including the one he picked up at the World Cup.
Oh, yeah.
I think the concussions for Roda, I'm surprised that he even continued to play at his time at Eintracht Frankfurt because of all the things that he had been through medically in his career. So I'm not surprised that his career, let's say, didn't turn out to the highest potential and concussions do add up. Okay,
definitely.
We're so far off the path. I want to come back as we kind of wrap the show up to the match that we're previewing. Again, this is so much fun. So I'm going to give you two hypotheticals, and You can answer them any way you'd like. So let's start with the positive for Dortmund here. If Dortmund were to win this match, and I guess there's many different ways to add this, right? If Dortmund is, or even say playing well, if Dortmund is playing well, if Dortmund has a lead, if Dortmund wins the first leg, what will have happened? What is going on? What are you don't even have to get into the tactics, but what are some of the things that you'd expect would have had to happen for a Dortmund victory?
Yeah, I mean, we can basically, if we can replace Schlotterbeck successfully, and basically, if we can get a really good defensive result, I think we're going to have to basically pull all the stops out. I mean, playing at the Camp Nou, or is it No Camp? I never remember. It's Camp Nou, right?
It's Montjuic at the moment, so it's going to be Camp Nou later.
Yeah,
It's not open yet, but yes, at Montjuic.
it's Montjuic, and funnily enough, I've actually been up there. That was the former Olympic Stadium in 1992. Yeah, I've actually been up there. That's right. Of course, you were never going to play at the Espanyol ground, were you? Let's face it.
Absolutely not. Yeah, but Montjuic
So,
Montjuic's tough to get up to. So the crowds in the Champions League have still. I'm interested to see as the tension at the end of the season and trophies become closer and closer. I do wonder what those atmospheres are going to be, and they have been filling the stadium up in the last few weeks with that again the ever present idea that trophies are coming as opposed to the last season or the beginning of the season, some of those group stage games. But I guess to your point, though, the atmosphere still, I would assume it's going to be about 38 to 45,000 people there.
yeah. Yeah, so which is very, very low for Barcelona, but maybe somewhat to our advantage. So at the end of the day, look, I mean, pound for pound, we're not on the same level as Barcelona. I'm just going to say it straight. It's not that I'm not, a massive fan. It's just that at the end of the day, I have to recognize that. But on a good day, Borussia Dortmund is very capable of soaking up the pressure. They have a very good back line indeed, in my opinion. Particularly the two Scandinavian players, Riasson and Svensson, have really made a big difference, and I hope that we get to sign Svensson on a permanent. In terms of the midfield, I would love to see the inclusion of Pascal Gross because I think he adds quite a lot of muscle alongside Sally Ochan. And I think that we should play more defensively against a side like Barcelona. But at the end of the day, you've got to really watch Borussia Dortmund on the break because, like Borussia Dortmund of all the years, they are a counter-attacking, high-pressing team. And with players like Karim Adeyemi, who is as fast as anyone in the Barca lineup, and also Maxi Bayer, who is also very good with his head. You've got to be very conscious that at the end of the day, we've also got an incredible centre forward in Serhou Guirassy, and he's earned those 25 goals this season. If he gets the service, then I think Schlotterbeck is a loss, especially because Schlotterbeck has been taking the corners in recent times and he's been thumping some really good goals into the box, which Baxi Bayer has got his head on the end of, and it's been looking really good. But as I said, I mean, we are a high-pressing, counter-attacking team who can soak up a lot. And if I remember anything well, I was out at Sporting Lisbon, what was it, a couple of months ago, amazing. The 3-0 that night, first half Sporting seemed to have the better of us, but in the second half we just basically just crushed it because we made full use of the wide spaces and the speed that we have in the attacking midfield and the forwards. So, 3-0 away at Sporting Lisbon is no small result. And whilst Lille was a more defensive game, at the end of the day, when Dortmund gets it right, they really get it right. So I think this is going to be a very, very tight game. And that's why my prediction, I think, for the game is probably going to be 2-2. It sounds optimistic, but I can see Dortmund scoring.
That's interesting. I kind of take the same approach that you do in that I think both these defenses are not as perfect as they might be. I think Barcelona, don't be confused by some of the ideas of the pundits that I think more internationally have said about the High Line. The High Line have not been leaky the way that even it was earlier in the season. That is very much fortified. Inigo Martinez is a name that people just don't recognize or care about because Inigo Martinez is another one of those examples that he's only played in Spain. He makes a move to Barcelona in his late 30s, so he never played for Real Madrid, never played for even Atletico Madrid or Barcelona until he was 30. 31 years old is when he makes his move. So he's just even more important than Kubarsi. And to your point, I think Barcelona is going to have the ball a lot. So the players that are going to be most significant for Barcelona are going to be Kubarsi. And I think the thing that does set Barcelona apart from Dortmund, and to your point, I think I agree with you. If Dortmund is doing well, it's because their forwards used their speed and made something happen. I think very much
Yeah.
the first leg, the first match that they had, with the 3-2. If Grassi is able to kind of
Beautiful.
not have to do much himself, he just kind of gets the ball to feet and can cause some havoc with Kubarsi and Igor Martinez, then yes, Dortmund will be on the front foot. And you're right, the speedy wingers, if they can find a way in behind Koundé, if they can find a way in behind Balde, which if Barcelona has to do what they've been doing in La Liga recently, which is 65, 75% of possession, potentially. I mean, again, a Dortmund side, you wouldn't expect that, but Dortmund this season, they've shown that they can, to your point, absorb some pressure. So if they can absorb some pressure, then get out on the break, that'll work them out. But I think the big disadvantage, I'm kind of answering the question I'm about to ask you, which is what would happen if Dortmund isn't doing well? To me, I'm going to answer it for you first, is that if Pedri and De Jong are as, in regards to who the third midfielder is, whether it's Gabi, whether it's Fermin Lopez, that double pivot of Pedri and De Jong, I don't know if Dortmund's midfield, especially with Gross likely out of this game, I just don't know if they can match up with the way that Pedri and De Jong can control that game. So if Pedri and De Jong find their moments and pick their moments, I just don't know if Dortmund I just don't know if their forwards are going to have enough even opportunities, right? Like if Dortmund aren't clinical, that they're doomed in this match, because I don't know how many chances Dortmund's actually going to have. And I think if Pedri and De Jong allow Barcelona in that midfield to control that game, especially at home, to me, my prediction for this first leg is going to be 2-1 Barcelona, simply because I think the form that Pedri and De Jong are in at the moment, I don't know if Dortmund's midfield can match that. And the only time that I think Barcelona have really struggled lately is when teams were able to batten it down the hatches with more even defensive-minded midfielders, where they have, but even then it didn't work. Like Osasuna on the Thursday coming back from the international break were blown off the field by Barcelona, and they started 3 defensive midfielders. So it really just kind of, for Barcelona, depends on what kind of day Pedri wants to have, which for me, he hasn't had a bad one. Real Betis was probably his worst day since the new year, and even then Barcelona they did wind up losing out on the game. Barcelona unbeaten since 2025 began. And looking at Dortmund in the way that they are, even though they won 4-1 against Freiburg over the weekend, I know it feels like Barcelona fans, with all the recent failures in the Champions League, you want to be very cautious. But I do look at it and say, I think Barcelona, especially in this first leg, are slightly in charge. So for me,
Oh yeah,
it's even a success for Barcelona. If it's 2-1 in the first leg, and I don't want to jump ahead, but regardless of what happens in the first leg, to me, at Dortmund, if you are up 2-1 in the first leg, a 1-1 is fine, right? And I think Dortmund will have that slight advantage in energy with the home crowd as well. So for Barcelona, 2-1 and 1-1 still gets you into the into the semifinals, right? Which is, for Barcelona, so significant and a place to be. So yeah, I think if you want to add into that, like what would go wrong for Dortmund, I think you've already kind of said it, where if they're more defensive and Schlotterbeck can't be replaced, then there's going to be an issue.
yeah, absolutely, Dan. As usual, you're razor sharp in your analysis, and you obviously love your club immensely, which comes across. Your passion really comes across, and it's great to hear it. Look, Barcelona have never lost in 5 games against Borussia Dortmund. I was talking to Ibrahim Tanko, who's the assistant manager of Ghana national team, before the show. He played against Barcelona in the Super Cup in the 90s. I think it was about 91, something like that. And he said that it's going to be a massive occasion for the club. Karim Adeyemi was saying himself that they're going to be very confident going into the game. Gregor Kobel said the pressure is off us. Basically, we know very well that we're going into this a second fiddle. And I have to be frank and say that, the real advantage that we have is that the second game is in Dortmund. And that's something that everyone's excited about. The tickets have literally flown out. I mean, I tried to pick up a ticket this morning and, forget about it. I mean, it's going to be 81,000, totally packed. And if Barcelona need to get a result, they need to score a few goals in this first goal. They need to overwhelm us, because when you come out to Dortmund, the pressure's all going to be on Barcelona. So you need to have at least a couple of goals advantage, or otherwise it's going to be much like Lille experienced. And, I think I have a inclination that there or thereabouts that Barcelona will probably be superior, because basically the quality in the side is something to be admired worldwide, I would say, so it's pretty obvious in a way. But Dortmund are going to give it their all, and I think we're not feeling particularly pressure. We've come off the back of 2 wins against good sides, Freiburg and Mainz, unexpected wins. There's a feeling in the club right now that Niko Kovac is starting to get the measure of it, that he's starting to really understand. I interviewed a very good friend of his who played 171 games for him with at Bayer Leverkusen, Carsten Ramelow, former Germany international, a couple of weeks ago. And he was saying that basically Nico is starting to show the potential that he has in terms of instilling the tactical intelligence and also the highly disciplined defensive performances. So, I mean, I think, from my perspective, I've kind of picked up a few good vibes here, and I'm starting to feel that there's some good things coming at just the right time, which could just about get Dortmund into the top 5, top 6. But it's going to be very, very, very much dependent on the results in the next couple of weeks. We've got Bayern Munich on Saturday, don't forget. So We've got Bayern away, sandwiched between the two Barcelona games. So there is literally no rest for the wicked there at all. This is like total pressure on the side, and we'll see. I mean, they'll either make it or they won't, and it's going to be a very interesting couple of weeks, Dan. So really, really good to get the chance to talk about it. And as I said, I love your show. You're doing some great work.
Thank you. Yeah, for Kovac, it's interesting because I believe he was the manager of Bayern Munich in 2018 when the two clubs met, and he's such a different manager. I mean, we're dating ourselves already because that was 6 years ago. He's been to Monaco, he's been to Wolfsburg, and now back to now back to Germany now for a few years with Wolfsburg and now with Borussia Dortmund. And he's just a different manager than he was even 7-8 years ago. He's more refined than the last time. We'll say, I guess the last time the Barcelona saw him.
You're right.
Yeah,
you're right. And I mean, he's got some good pedigree. I really wouldn't underestimate that. The double with Bayern Munich, although that's kind of expected in a way, but also the cup win with Eintracht Frankfurt. He kind of very much laid the foundations for success at Eintracht Frankfurt. They went on to win the Europa League unexpectedly in 2021, and a lot of that work was done by Niko Kovac. And also remember, his brother Robert Kovac is the assistant manager of Borussia Dortmund, so they have a very good working team there. He's only signed a contract for a year and a half, with the view that potentially if things don't work out, they don't get into Europe, that something might change. But to be fair, I think he's starting to get the measure of things. But these 3 games in the next 10 days are absolutely crucial in terms of our development and where the season's going. And it's been basically a nightmare season for the Borussia Dortmund, I'll tell you that straight. So it's going to come down to a few individual really good performances on the night as to whether we can get the measure of FC Barcelona or Barcelona CF, if it's Catalan. I don't know quite it is. But anyway, either way,
I will add for your listeners, so people who will listen to the show, hopefully we're Borussia Dortmund fans as well. I will say that another big reason why Dortmund might get a result against Barcelona is just merely fatigue for the Barcelona players. We just seen some performances. Rafinha has not come back from the international break looking like himself. Lewandowski is continuing to be 36 years old. He doesn't get younger from game to game. And Barcelona didn't really rotate against Real Betis in the 1-1. And even Lamine Yamal has had moments where he looked like a little tired, and then all of a sudden, again, coming back from the international break, you wonder if he rotated. He wasn't, and I think that being Lamine Yamal has been phenomenal in the last, even coming back from the international break with Real Betis, kind of in a game where we didn't see the best of him, and yet he was still the architect of the goal. So yes, Lamine Yamal and Pedri have kind of been above the idea of fatigue. But I think in general, it's very difficult to play across all these different international competitions and domestic competitions. And for Dortmund, I find that, yes, a very interesting parallel. That Barcelona, it feels like Barcelona's players are just starting to wear down and get tired. But then I look around and very much anecdotally for Borussia Dortmund, you've got Barcelona, Bayern Munich, Barcelona. So as a club, you have to prioritize all 3, which, as you know, is difficult to do, right? The players are saying that, hey, we only care about the next match. We're prepared for that. But then you play your eternal rival within 3-4 days of playing Barcelona. Then you play Barcelona again in the quarterfinals of the Champions League. As you mentioned, do you want to put all your eggs in the basket of the quarterfinals of the Champions League? Because again, winning the Champions League, I think still, even though you're only 4 matches away, and that's much more likely than winning the Bundesliga, obviously, mathematically, but yet those 4 Champions League matches, or 5, I should say, it's a really difficult ask to win the Champions League. I mean, there's a reason why clubs it's years and decades between wins, which, by the way, Borussia Dortmund do have a Champions League win, again, mid-90s for those their history. But okay, let's end with the last point here, because we can actually...
And in Munich it was too, 97, like this time again. Trust me, there is nothing we would love more than to go back. But last season against Real Madrid, I mean, sorry, again, I shouldn't mention that team, but last season at the Wembley, we put on an outstanding performance.
Yeah,
Let's face it, same thing in 2013 against Bayern Munich. This would be our fourth, but look, it's not going to happen, basically. Let's not set our expectations ridiculously high. We're going to go into this game with realistic expectations. We know who FC Barcelona are, but Spanish teams usually struggle against German teams, so I don't see
yeah.
it as a walk in the park by any means. And I wouldn't be surprised if we could pick up at least 1 point between the two games, to be frank.
Sure. Yeah. And then lastly, speaking of not winning a Champions League, but winning a whole lot of other things,
Oh, yeah.
Matt Hummels is not replacing anybody. He's retiring. The 2014 World Cup champion retiring at the end of the season at the age of 36, which I commend him for not staying on too long, because a lot of players, they stay on too long and I think it hurts their legacy. So I think he winds up going out right around the right time. Maybe he didn't need to go to Roma this past year, but he moved to Dortmund from Bayern Munich in 2008. So all the way back as a youth player. Then he did two spells at each club. Then he joined Roma last year. In totality, won 5 Bundesligas, 3 German Cups, 6 German Super Cups, a 2-time Champions League finalist with Dortmund. Is he a Borussia Dortmund player? Like, I know in the U.S. we care more about these Hall of Fame ideas.
Yeah.
If he goes into the Bundesliga Hall of Fame, is he wearing a Bayern Munich jersey or is he wearing a Dortmund jersey?
No, it's a Dortmund jersey. It's his identity. He's Munich born and bred. His family live in Munich and so on. But Mats has, he's the highlights of his career. I mean, he arguably he won more. He won 7 titles. He only won 3 with Borussia Dortmund. But at the end of the day, he was very much a Borussia Dortmund iconic figure of the club and an identification figure, we say in German. It's basically somebody who's totally identified with the club. And no, absolutely. I mean, Mats Hummels is somebody who has defined a generation in Dortmund. I've interviewed various players that have met him at different stages of his career, such as Delron Buckley, who met him before he even had a driving license. He used to drive him to training every day when he was like 17 years old. And Delron was a South Africa international who played for Dortmund and FC Basel, and so quite a big player at the time, 77 caps for South Africa. And he was talking to me about Matt's personality and the way he's developed over the years. And, I think, the thing for me, Dan, is that, at the end of the day, you either meet these people in person, you get the chance to interview them, or you meet people who know them, who tell you what the person's like behind the mask, And I think that Mats himself has just really proven himself as an incredibly professional, committed, and an honourable person. What I've observed with my own eyes over the years, I have to say I don't have Mats Hummels' autograph, which is a shame. I would like to have it. I have a lot of autographs, but not that one. Except I think he's on the 2017 jersey that I have. Yeah, nope. Was he? He was in Munich at the time, was he? I think he was in Munich. Okay, so I don't even have that one. Look, the bottom line is that Mats is a guy who always took the time to sign autographs for every single fan. And I've observed him year in, year out, spending 10 minutes, 15 minutes after the games, going around, doing the selfies, doing the autographs, taking time, going to the fan events, going to the end of season fan tournament that Borussia Dortmund have and things like that. And players like that, the players that are really honourable with the fans, that actually care, that want to put something back, those are the guys that get remembered. And Mats Hummels will always be remembered as a Dortmund legend. Of course, it was sad that he basically had a bit of a bust-up with Edin Terzic at the end, but quite honestly, that was kind of coming, and it was partially just because Mats is so very, very committed to the club Borussia Dortmund. And you said it yourself, and you said it in a perfect way. Guys like Marco Reus, Mats Hummels, and now Kevin De Bruyne, etc. They quit at the right time. Thomas Müller at Bayern Munich also. They either go over to, sorry to say this, but slightly smaller leagues like the MLS.
Yeah, or Saudi Arabia. Yep.
Yeah, Saudi Arabia, etc. Or they basically quit football altogether. I think Mats has got it exactly right. And likewise with Kevin De Bruyne, I live in England, obviously. It's a massive loss for the Premier League. But, if you get him over in the MLS, it'll be amazing to see Kevin De Bruyne out there alongside Marco Reus, alongside Leo Messi, etc. It can only benefit the American Soccer League. And lastly, I just wanted to ask you: are you guys really jazzed for the Club World Cup, FIFA Club Cup? I mean, it's pretty big, right?
Well, it's funny, as this summer comes about, this is my busy period, so I have a lot of other things that I'm doing as well. So if anything, I have my focus in different places, like my work for MLS, as well as again my broadcast career that has some of the bigger elements in the summertime. So if anything, I try to use the summertime for a little bit of rest and relaxation. So
Yeah.
with Barcelona not in the Club World Cup, it almost is a moment for me to breathe and kind of reset and get all my work done. So
Ah,
as exciting as in to have a lot of people here, I think this is not say a conversation for another time, but the U.S. market, I actually haven't said this, and people have asked me on the gives me a good chance to plug the watch alongs on Big Up. So again, watch alongs on Big Up. Please subscribe to the watch alongs on Big Up. Become a community member for free, and you can ask these kind of questions that I don't have the time to get into in the regular videos of the 5 headlines. But I think the U.S. audience is they're just so fickle. There's just so many other things happening with the U.S. attention span in general, and so the Club World Cup, to be honest with you, in my world, I know the algorithms, whether it's on Instagram or wherever, they are pushing the Club World Cup to me because I am the demographic, I am the audience for that. I don't really know if it's taking hold. I just don't in the US if that's going to be enough to move a needle. I just like unless honestly, when you talk to the average, yes, there are millions and millions of people in the US. It's just such a big country. So it depends on even what city you're talking about or what neighborhood you're talking about as to how much they're going to care about the Club World Cup. Because some stadiums with the right teams are going to be filled up. It's why every time that Mexican teams come up and play in wherever it may be, Texas, that Club America's up, and it's just Dallas is filled, right? The stadium is filled, and so it really does depend on the city and the club that winds up coming around. So yes, those Real Madrid games are going to sell out, right? But if they don't, I'm worried about the Club World Cup having too many teams and it just not really being competitive, right? And just kind of not grabbing the attention. And it's going to be an interesting thing because I don't know how much that the American we'll say football infrastructure can learn from the Club World Cup ahead of the World Cup in 2026 next season. As I said, I tend to be very cynical. I just don't know with the runway that American, I'll call it soccer in this case, but the runway that American soccer has had, I am a little bit skeptical. I'm a little worried that it's going to be the same story that it was in 2020. Well, 2022 was interesting because of Messi for me. So it was also post pandemic. So it was very much a different 2022, also in Qatar in wintertime. I'm going to put an asterisk next to that one, but 2018, 2014, 2010, all those World Cups here. And now I think the Euros have also grown quite a bit in the US. That's, I think, a better marker of success than the World Cup. But the World Cup is that time where you walk around and there are parties and there are things happening and there are big viewing parties and it's a lot of people, but it's people kind of there in the event in the moment. And I don't know it will linger, right? And I think the Club World Cup is the same thing. I don't know if any buzz or excitement about that. I think you really have to have. I don't even know if Real Madrid, being the biggest club in the Club World Cup, I don't know if Real Madrid have that. It is Mbappe, right? But outside of Mbappe, if Mbappe is not scoring, if Mbappe isn't scoring a hat trick or 2 goals every game and really catching fire, because I do look at young jerseys and kids' jerseys, I think tell me, kind of give me the pulse of what that sport is in this country more than anything. And the 2 jerseys I see more than anything else is Mbappe PSG jersey still and Messi Inter Miami. Like those are the 2 jerseys I see in kids in the area and around. I mean, I'm in the New York area, so in the New York area, I still see the Messi jersey. It still matters. I still see Ronaldo jerseys, not in the Saudi Arabia, but I still see like Real Madrid Ronaldo jerseys, but on like people more my age or in their 20s or something. And you see the Mbappes and Real Madrid and in PSG. Mbappe is the guy that kind of continues, I think, to push things forward for the young people. And Lamine Yamal being 17, that is where I'm excited. I'm excited for the future of Barcelona, even more so than American soccer, even though, again, my best chance of seeing Lamine Yamal here in the U.S. is when he comes here for the World Cup, if that makes any sense. So, yeah, I don't know. In a perfect world, let me try to be positive for just a second. To be optimistic, Lamine Yamal comes to the U.S. and creates a ton of new Barcelona fans. Then the Barcelona podcast pops off, and it's a confluence of young American fans enjoying Lamine Yamal for the next 15 years. That would be delightful. I think my accountant and my girlfriend would be happiest about those things, even more so than I think me from a viewer base. I think my family and friends would be like, okay, thank goodness that this 17-year-old, or this by that time a 19-year-old, because his birthday's in July, so still 18, 19 years old when the World stuff happens. But yes, maybe this teenager will make sure that Dan has food on the table for the next two.
All I can say, Dan, is what comes across is that you are basically somebody who's really into football. It's not just a thing with you, because at the end of the day, you support one of the greatest clubs on earth, and basically
Same.
a club with an authentic football culture, and that's why you don't buy into these kind of, fancy kind of plastic tournaments and so on. And we have plenty of them right now. And you know what, Dan? Keep it real. Keep it real over there. It's been an absolute honor and a pleasure talking to you. You've got a sharp mind. You're doing what you do with real passion, and a beautiful club, FC Barcelona. And thank you so much for having me. And I look forward to talking another time. Well, in fact, we're talking in a couple of weeks' time, a bit before the BVB game, so we'll have plenty to analyze. So looking forward, Dan. Thanks a lot, man. All the best to you, and best greetings out to New York.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ben. Again, you can find him. Well, you can find him with me next week on his podcast, of course. But in the meantime, also find him on BBC, ITV, The Zone, 442, One Football. Again, Ben, you're also one of the best in the business. The number of interviews you do, and I could again spend. We've gone over time, so I could spend a lot of time trying to return the favor. But I'm going to do that on your podcast. So I'm going to make sure that I'm not going to receive compliments. I'm going to practice that, and I'm going to return the favor on your podcast in a week.
All right, sir.
About a week's time. So yes, enjoy the first leg, and we'll see everybody again. The watch along on Wednesday. More than anything else, again, subscribing on YouTube, help me out on Patreon. There's a bunch of different ways you can help out the show. Always yes, but in the interim, on Wednesday for that game against Borussia Dortmund, I will be on bigup.com/the Barcelona podcast. So watch the game with me, become a community member for free. And we have tactics boards, we have the scoreboard, we do all those fun things there. And you can also come on and talk to me as a guest. You can actually come in on the stage and speak to me as the game is going on. So that is something that I would love for people to take advantage of. Again, that's the watch along on bigup.com for that Borussia Dortmund match. And then, of course, subscribe on YouTube, give a like, leave a comment for all this kind of stuff, especially if you want me to do more long form. I've been a lot of solo stuff this year. So if you want more long form content, let me know how much you enjoyed this. And maybe I'll be a little bit better of a journalist like Ben and have some of the interviews that he does. So get me working harder, everybody. So again, Patreon and all that helps out. But until next time, well, what does the Borussia Dortmund say? Barça says Forza Barça. So what is your...
We'll say, hey, Abe, for me.